after the transfer portal dead period, Louisville needs to put most of the focus on the defensive side of the football.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? Welcome into this Friday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my 5th year covering the University of Louisville, 3rd year hosting the show, and I want to take the time to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day all throughout 2024. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Now, today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. All you have to do, visit FanDuel.com to get started. We are currently in the transfer portal dead period window that will lift in early January. We'll discuss that when the period lifts, defense needs to be the main focus for the Louisville football program. We'll also discuss the newest member of the portal class, Charlotte edge rusher Demon Clowney, what he brings to the Cardinals defense. And then we'll preview the New Year's Eve Sun Bowl matchup against the Washington Huskies, what we're hoping to see from the Cardinals, the bowl opt-outs, how Louisville matches up with Jed Fish's team, and much, much more. A lot of portal talk, a lot of football talk on the show today. This will be the last episode of the week. There won't be an episode on Monday. To my knowledge, there will be one on Tuesday following the Sun Bowl results. So just a heads up on that. We're currently in a weird period where we had a couple weeks of just go, 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 all gas, no brakes, with how the portal was just popping off. And then everything came to a screeching halt when the dead period arrived earlier this week. Basically what that means is that coaches and members of the staff aren't able to have in-person communication, whether it be official or unofficial visits with any player or recruit. You're not seeing many commitments. You're seeing a couple, but not many. So it's kind of that lull in the period before things start up in early January. To my understanding, the portal dead period ends on December 31st, and then there's a quiet period from the 1st to the 5th, but basically everything opens back up on January 5th. So you've got a little bit of time. And when that portal dead period window lifts, a lot of the focus for Louisville needs to be on the defensive side of the football. For starters, mainly because the offensive side, everything is kind of being close to good to go. You got your QB1 in the portal in Miller Moss. You bring back both of your running backs with Isaac Brown and Duke Watson. Colin Lacey and Chris Bell are supposed to be back. You will go to the portal to probably bring in a tight end or two and also a solid wide receiver 3. You did a really good job of addressing the offensive line. Nair Jackson, Mac Pounders, Jordan Church, Mohamed Musa. Like, you brought in a handful of offensive linemen to fill some gaps and to fill some depth needs. But overall, your offense is kind of set. Like, things are looking good for your offense. And then you look at the defense. And the Cardinals, having brought 13 transfers in so far, they've addressed defensive needs. But most of the holes on the team will be from the defensive side. We're going to look at the starting 11 on defense from this year and how many guys Louisville will need to replace. Ashton Gelati, gone. Destel, gone. Both of those don't have any eligibility left. Jared Dawson's going to the portal. That's 3. Tremel Logan doesn't have any eligibility. That's 4. You may bring back, I think you're going to bring back Stanquan Clark. TJ Quinn went through senior day. It's a question whether or not he's going to be back. For the moment, until we hear his decision, that's 5. You're likely going to be bringing back Antonio Watts. Quincy Riley, NFL, that's 6. MJ Griffin, that's 7. Tamari McDonald, that's 8. Corey Thornton, that's 9. Maybe you bring back TJ Quinn. That would mean that you still have to replace, at the very least, 8 starting players from the 2024 defense. Now, you do have some guys that will rise up into the potential spots. Maybe Renee Conga, Jordan Gerard has has another year of eligibility left. D'Angelo Hutchinson could potentially be a starting safety. But for the most part, you do have some depth pieces that could rise up. But a lot of the spots you're going to have to fill in the portal. And with the guys that you have brought in, you look at the defensive line. Demon Clowney, Louisville just brought in from Charlotte. Clev Luben from Coastal Carolina. Jerry Lawson from Abilene Christian. The secondary pieces, you have, also Wesley Bailey from Rutgers. The secondary pieces that you brought in, Rodney Johnson, JoJo Evans. Also, I'm missing someone, and I don't know why I'm missing that player. I literally just had it written down. My apologies there. But Louisville has brought in multiple guys on the defensive side of the football. So it's not like they haven't addressed some needs, right? I don't know how I forgot about Jabari Mack, but Jabari Mack in the secondary, you have Darius Thomas as sort of that outside linebacker hybrid. And I forgot to mention on the offensive line side, Carter Gilliam. I was looking at On3's portal list, and they don't really break it down from like commitments and decommitments, so it's kind of hard to read. So I just switched over to the 24/7 site, and it's really much easier to read, but nonetheless, it is what it is. But so Louisville has added some defensive pieces. I think a lot of these pieces are going to be depth guys. I think if you're looking at who they brought in so far, the one penciled in starter is Clev Luben. I think he's going to be your starting outside linebacker at the guard spot, the pass rushing linebacker. And really good addition there. One of the best edge rushers in the portal, top 2 according to On3 Sports. Everyone else, and just because players aren't penciled in starters doesn't mean that they're not going to be a starter or contend for starting snaps. I think everyone else is going to have to be in a position battle. Like you look at the defensive line, is Jerry Lawson going to start over Renee Conga and possibly Jordan Girard? Maybe, but possibly not likely. Demon Clowney, I think, is the backup to Clev Luben. I think that Wesley Bailey could be in line to start at the defensive end spot, but I think that the Cardinals could still add a guy at that position. So that's up in the air. I think Darius Thomas will share the field with Antonio Watts, sort of how Ben Perry did. I'm just not sure what that role looks like. Everything gets kind of tricky when you talk about, the 4-2-5 based defensive package. And then you look at the secondary. I like what Jabari Mack, Rodney Johnson, and JoJo Evans bring to the back end of the Louisville defense. And I think that JoJo Evans could contend for a starting spot at safety, as well as Johnson and Mack competing for starting spots at cornerback. But the risk with non-Power 4 transfers is that you always have to wonder, is the production from the previous level going to translate to the ACC level? And they possibly could. But I think at the moment, Louisville has many starting spots to fill on the defense. So by default, most of the focus has to go to that side of the football because you're replacing not just starting level guys, but like all-American type talent. And with the guys that you have lost and with the players returning, I think that a couple of them could fill starting spots. Like I think TJ Capers could fill the TJ Quinn role. Like I'm looking forward to seeing that. I think Renee Conga can fill the Des Tell role, and if Jordan Girard comes back, he can fill the Jared Dawson role. Same with potentially Thor Griffith. You have a handful of young defensive linemen that could rise up into playing time at the safety spot. D'Angelo Hutchinson, so on and so forth. Like there are players on this roster that could rise up. So you probably don't have to fill all 8 or 9 via the portal, but you are going to have to fill a handful of them. And you've filled one so far with Clev Luben. The other guys that you brought in, I think, and you also lost some depth pieces. So I think the defensive players that you have committed, are at the very least going to fill some depth spots. I like who Louisville has brought in, but when it comes to like, okay, that guy is 100% without a doubt a starter and a difference maker, I think that the only one that really fits that bill at the moment is Clev Luben. And that, again, that's no disrespect to who Louisville has brought in. No disrespect. Because obviously we're trusting the coaching staff to bring in guys that are able to, fill a role within this defense. But at the end of the day, the difference from last year's portal to this year is that you got the luxury of bringing a good amount of pieces back. This year, you don't. You have to overhaul your defense. So when the portal lifts, it's critical that Louisville is able to not only put major focus on that side of the football, but get the results, get the commitments. Because if they don't, we'll see. And if Louisville doesn't make a shift in coaching on the defensive side, things might get a little bit more interesting. So January is going to be as key as December was for the Louisville defense. But earlier this week, it started to be rumored at the end of last week that Louisville was addressing the edge spot. They got Clev Luben, and they also got another outside linebacker to play for next year's team. We'll discuss what Demon Clowney will bring to the Cardinals defense when we come back on this Friday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. I've used it to cancel services I wasn't using anymore, and I've already saved a ton. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future. No more stressing out about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. And while I have you, I want to tell you about our friends over at HomeField. HomeField is a premium collegiate apparel brand based out of Indianapolis. They have partnered with the University of Louisville to sell a bunch of vintage clothing that makes things comfortable, and it's officially licensed apparel with vintage college designs. If you go to checkout at homefieldapparel.com, you can use my promo code CARDS24 to get 20% off of your gear. You can see all of the wide selection of options available and get the convenience of online shopping. Look, HomeField Apparel is my place to go for all of my vintage apparel needs. That is homefieldapparel.com to find all of your Louisville Cardinals apparel. And don't forget, 15% off your purchase. I'm sorry, not 20% off, 15% off with the unique promo code CARDS24. I'm really excited about this next wave of the transfer portal madness just because it's stressful trying to ride that roller coaster, but it's also fun because things seemingly happen every day. And right now we're in that period where we're kind of just like looking around, the Will Smith meme where, he walks in the living room on Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and he's just throws his arms up and he's just kind of looking around. And that's kind of how we feel with the portal, with the dead period. But it wasn't all boredom for Louisville. Louisville did get another commitment in the dead period. Charlotte edge rusher Demon Clowney. He was actually the first transfer portal player that we talked about on this show, if you remember, many days ago, many episodes ago, one of the first episodes in the month of December, he was the first player that was announced to have a visit with Louisville, and he made the visit, and seemingly nothing came from it. But officially, Demon Clowney signed with the Cardinals. 6'4" edge rusher from Baltimore, Maryland, immediately on the first team all college football names list. Demon Clowney, spelled demon. I mean, that's as badass of a name as they come, right? Originally had signed with Ole Miss. Now committed to LSU, was an LSU commit for a while. And depending on who you talk to, I've heard conflicting reports. I don't know the validity of either, but one side says that he just wanted to, make sure he's making the right decision. The other side says that LSU kind of nudged him to reopen his recruitment. Regardless, he ends up signing with Lane Kiffin's program and isn't able to see the field much in the first 3 seasons in Oxford. 3 years where he had less than 5 total tackles. And he transfers over to Charlotte to try to get onto the field and have a level of production. And he's able to do so. 33 tackles in 2023, 2.5 sacks. In 2024, he had 26 tackles and 2 sacks. So I think that when you look at the eligibility there, obviously he has the 2020 COVID year. And I think he has another redshirt year as well, which would mean that I believe, now don't quote me on this, but I think he has 2 years of eligibility remaining, if I'm not mistaken. Actually, no, maybe just 1. Eligibility is a tough discussion because you just never know. He at least has 1. Obviously, he's coming to Louisville, but I'm not sure if he has 2 or not. But Clowney has that burst off the line of scrimmage, 6'4", 250 pounds. I think he will translate to playing that guard position behind Clev Luben or competing for that spot with Clev. One thing that I do wonder is the amount of pass rush at Charlotte. Only 4.5 sacks in 2 years. So I understand that production isn't everything. Like you look at the Rene Conga situation, not a ton of production, but there were injuries in that situation, and he was at a power 4 spot. You're coming from a non-power 4 spot, and you only have 4.5 sacks in 2 seasons. The question is, how much can you expect? And I think that he is mainly going to be used, to set the edge and defend the run, which he was able to do at the group of 5 level. But will that be able to translate over to the power 4 pass rush? I'm really interested to see, how serviceable he's going to be in that regard. And again, you can't really, for the most part, I'm sorry, I just completely lost my train of thought as I'm sitting here typing, trying to do some reference points of trying to find how many quarterback pressures that he had. But ultimately, what I'm trying to get at is that you can't put all of the stock in previous production because situations do matter. Defenses matter. Here's what I was looking for. This past year, he played in 10 games, had 3 starts on the season, had 6 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. I'm not seeing the quarterback pressures. But ultimately, I like this as a depth commitment for the Cardinals. Cousin of NFL star Jadeveon Clowney, highly rated guy coming out of high school, veteran player that's played a ton of snaps over the past 2 seasons. So I like this as a depth move. When we originally heard that he was going to be making the visit, one thing that I was wondering was, okay, is he like the starter at outside linebacker? Like, are you going to go to him as the starter? And it doesn't seem like that's the case. And I'm okay with that. I think he's going to compete for the spot, but ultimately I think that that's Clev Luben's to lose. So the burst off the edge, the ability to defend the run, I like his twitch and that explosiveness, getting to the outside and being able to set that edge. One thing that we're focusing on is, clearly the pass rush. Is he going to be able to improve? And we've seen players that didn't have the production be able to improve in this system just because the staff believed in the skill set. And don't take this as me saying that he's not going to be successful. That's just something that I'm focusing on, saying, hey, look, it was kind of up and down. He had obviously 2 career seasons at Charlotte, but it wasn't something that is going to jump off the page. So I like this commitment. You have to fill depth. Louisville doesn't have that at the edge spots whatsoever. So we'll see if the Cardinals are looking to add more players at edge rusher. I believe that they likely will, but only one way to find out. And you'll see who gets brought on a visit in early and mid-January. So before that, the Cardinals will end the 2024 season on the final day of 2024 when they take on the Washington Huskies down in El Paso in the Sun Bowl. We'll preview that matchup, discuss what we'd like to see from the Cardinals, and more on this Friday episode of the Locked On Louisville podcast. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points each team will score. If you're new, visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Card Nation, want to take this time again to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the show is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week. Your team every day. Louisville will take on the Washington Huskies in the Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl on New Year's Eve, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, down in El Paso, Texas. The Huskies coming into this matchup at 6-6, the first year head coach Jed Fish's tenure. Looking at the results here, not the greatest Big Ten season for the Huskies, coming off of the national championship appearance. They went 4-5 in conference play. Losses to Washington State, Rutgers, Iowa, Indiana, Penn State, and Oregon. They did, however, defeat USC, and they defeated Michigan. Michigan wasn't the greatest, but they were ranked at that time. So decent season for the Huskies. They obviously lost a lot. It's hard to really discuss bowl games because of all the opt-outs. Louisville not having Tyler Shuck, Ja'Cory Brooks, Quincy Riley, Ashton Gelati, and obviously the players that are transferring out. So a couple things that I want to see. We'll talk about 3 of them. For starters, I want to see Harrison Bailey / Deuce Adams / maybe Brady Allen, since he withdrew from the portal, look good. I want to see them be serviceable in this offense. I want to see them be able to move the ball down the field and not have to rely just on running the football to have success. Like, I want to see someone step up for the Cardinals at signal caller to be able to have a good amount of success on offense. The second thing I want to see, Colin Lacey is playing in the bowl game. I really want to see what the role looks like for him, because no Ja'Cory Brooks. You don't have Tyler Shuck, so what's that camaraderie going to look like? What's the chemistry? I would imagine with no Ja'Cory Brooks, there's going to be a lot of focus on Isaac Brown and Duke Watson. They're going to lean on Chris Bell in the receiving corps. But I also want to see Colin Lacey. He hasn't played in a couple of months. Not much this season after coming back from that collarbone injury. I would like to see Louisville have a couple of plays of trying to get him the football out in space. Like, I would love nothing more than to watch Colin Lacey have a couple of big-time plays against Washington and that drive the excitement for what is to come in 2025 for Lacey. Like, that would be huge for me. So offensively, I mean, I imagine Louisville's going to rely a ton on running the football, as they should, as they have. Defensively, this is where things get tricky because Will Rogers, Washington quarterback, also won't be playing in the bowl. It's going to be Demond Williams Jr. Sorry, I think that's how you pronounce his first name, Demond. Played behind Rogers this year, had 570 yards and 4 touchdowns. He appeared in a handful of games, has thrown a couple passes in pretty much every single game. Also, 63 carries, 234 yards, and a touchdown. So doesn't have a game where he rushed for over 40 yards, but is a guy that can get out and use his legs. 5'11", 187 pounds from Chandler, Arizona, which is around the area where Tyler Chuck and Jawar Jordan come from. So pretty interesting there. But you have a new quarterback where you don't have a ton of film on him, sort of like the Miller Moss situation last year. For me, what I want to see from the defense is don't get embarrassed. Like, we don't know if Ron English is coming back yet or not. And that makes me feel a little uneasy considering that the defense really wasn't that great this year despite having a ton of talent, but I digress. You don't know whether he's coming back or not. Last year's bowl game, Louisville had no answer for Miller Moss and USC's offense. Like, you're not playing as high-powered of an offense as you were last year. But if Washington moves the football and Louisville shows again that they can't defend the mobile quarterback and the defense just gets gashed, and regardless of Louisville wins, if they give up a ton of points, it's not going to instill a ton of optimism defensively because you're replacing a ton of guys for next year's team. So I want to see Stanquan Clark and TJ Capers and D'Angelo Hutchinson and all these other defensive guys make plays. I want to see the defensive coaching staff put the Cardinals in the best position to succeed and have a result like you did against Pittsburgh and Kentucky. So like I said, hard to really discuss the bowl game because of how many opt-outs there are, but I still find significance in a bowl game. I mean, you got rewarded for winning over 6 games, and I'm traditional in that thinking. I understand that, it's not as significant as it used to be, but I'm looking forward. I would love to win a bowl game. So Louisville plays Washington, Tony the Tiger Sun Bowl on Tuesday, December 31st at 2 p.m. Eastern time. We will break down what happens when we come back on Tuesday evening. But that is going to wrap up this Friday edition of the show. Everyone have a great day. Have a great weekend. We'll see you right back here on Tuesday.